Here's a great example of the old Toll Brothers Railroad road bed through this section of the forest here. And here's some of the original old railroad ties from the narrow gauge logging railroad that ran through here in the late 1800s. Let's see if we can get a closer look. So there you can get an idea of the width of the gauge of the railroad, the tie plates nailed onto there with the spikes. And I bet you if you dug around through here, you could still find some spikes today. There's another old railroad tie. There's just a timber, and then more railroad ties from the Toll Brothers Logging Railroad, converted to OHV multi-use trail system. And a trail system is a very important part of your local economy, and might be even more so than ever in the state of today's economy. There he is. Boys are out riding. Look at that. KTM. Kawasaki. The trails are just beginning to reopen here in the Tahoe National Forest, and I want to show you some forest management that we need more of. This is a great example of a controlled burn and controlling of the underbrush here in the Tahoe National Forest. A small section that we need a lot more of. They've gone ahead and mechanically cut all the small stuff out of here, and then set up the burn piles, and then gone ahead and burn the burn piles and a controlled burn, and just let it slowly muck its way through the forest. Here comes another rider now, and leaving the big timber behind. This sort of timber stand is about the right size and spacing for our forest here in the Tahoe National Forest. So good to see. We need some more of this sort of forest management all throughout the western U.S. Get out there and ride while you can. The trail conditions are just about perfect right now. And thanks for all the volunteers that come out here to reopen the trails every year. Carry a saw. See you here. Here's a good example of a plantation, I don't know, probably 20, 30 years old, predominantly ponderosa pine, some white fir, Doug fir, cedar. But it's been cleaned up under the trees, and the trees have been thinned out enough. Soon these trees will be big enough to handle prescribed burns. Now here, just about 100 yards away from that managed forest, is a more typical example of the majority of forest around here, unmanaged forest, and it's just completely overcrowded with dense underbrush. It's got a good establishment of tall timber in here, but this dense underbrush can wipe it all out in the event of a fire. So a lot of people ask, why do you need to manage the forest? The forest got along fine just naturally for years and years. Well, it did before, here in California, before the gold rush. It got along fine with the natural cover of the tall timber, providing enough shade to suppress this underbrush, coupled with the natural use of fire, lightning strikes and that sort of thing, plus the Native American Indians managing the forest to some degree each fall season as they burned some of this underbrush out as they left the high country and headed back for the lower country for the winter. When the gold rush came, this place was denuded. It was just wiped out for timber. In fact, this is along the old Toll Brothers Logging Railroad route, which was brought in here to harvest this tall timber for the gold rush, needed for the entire industrialization of the gold rush, trestles and bridges and gold mining equipment and shoring up gold mines. So ever since, once you so alter the ecoscape like that, you got to manage it. It becomes basically a giant Christmas tree farm. It's very hard to reintroduce fire into a system that's been so drastically altered with anything less than disastrous results for quite a few centuries until you get things back under control, back in balance. Your OHV dollars at work. Nice culvert, boys. Looks like eventually we'll have to clear out this little cedar here and dislodge this dam backing up into the culvert. Great work. Beautiful day on the trail. The Toll Brothers Logging Mill and Trail. Logging Railroad. Their mill was just down the trail back over that way. Back in the late 1800s. Brownie, what about riding out here by yourself all the time? Well, I prefer it, actually. There's no dust. There's no whining by other members in the party. There's no waiting, or there's no other people waiting for me as I go at whatever pace I choose to go out and stop and take a picture at whatever I want to look at. And there's no racing. As soon as you get more than two people on a motorcycle, two guys on a motorcycle, a race develops. And that's when the problems begin. So the first thing, it's much like flying a single engine airplane up here in the mountains solo. It's the same sort of preparation. You want to choose your weather. You want to choose your time of day. You want to leave a flight plan behind with the folks, with somebody that knows the area. I even leave a note sometimes on the car that at the where I parked the truck at, telling folks where I'm at and what time I left. And then most importantly, I got something like a Delorme InReach tracker. It might give you a little more confidence than you want, but something that can track you. Folks back home can watch your track, and you can send a message via GPS satellites outside of cell phone range in the event that you break down or you need something other than a 911 call. And of course, this thing will call 911 and send the cavalry through the GPS satellites without, again, having to use cell phone coverage. Other than that, you got enough water to get you through the day. You got enough tools to fix a flat on the trail. You're self-sufficient. You're independent. And then having some prior training helps too. If you're ex-military and got any kind of survival training, that helps tremendously out here in the outdoors. And I would suggest, and something I got to do, is do some recurrent or refresher survival training to keep your head in the game for that sort of thing. So be prepared if you got to spend the night out here on the trail. It's not the end of the world. So just relax and get out here and enjoy it. These particular trails are technical single track, but hundreds of miles of trail riding solo in Idaho have got me very comfortable riding the local trails here in Northern California. They're first and second gear. You're not going very fast. Usually the worst case scenario is just a slow speed tip over. And the exposure to steep drop-offs is not too bad on these trails here. Up in Downeyville, that's another story. So get out there and ride while you can. And riding by yourself is not, if taking the correct precautions, is not the most dangerous thing in the world to do. And another thing, you got to work on your retirement skill sets, because goofing off takes a lot of time, and quality goofing off takes a lot of time and research. We spend so much time working on our professional careers. We learn some things as a kid, but then we have to put all that aside and work full-time on our professional career. As a professional pilot, that's all you do. Eat, sleep, and drink flying, especially if you're military. And you lose track of all those things that you did once in your youth. So in your last 10 or 20 years prior to retirement, you got to actively stay current on your retirement skill sets, like whether it's riding a dirt bike or the golfing or whatever, I would recommend something active, physically active, mountain biking, that you continue to do those things so that by the time that you retire, you're not terrified of the prospect of being bored. Meanwhile, back at the truck, a whole bunch of folks have shown up to ride the trails, including United pilot Mike Smith with the latest grim news from that company. So that was Mike Smith and Jeremy, a couple United pilots. I didn't want to talk shop today, but they're looking at 4,500 displacements, potentially pilot displacements over at United Airlines, and they got a big plan for it, potentially up to 6,000 displacements. Displacements which could easily lead to furloughs once the October deadline for the CARES Act expires. Talk to a White Cloud Helitac crew. What are they doing for fire camp this year with the COVID going on? And the plan is right now is they get their individual crews, their small individual crews, all tested for COVID and clear, and then they'll just stick together and work as a crew. They still have not quite worked out what are they going to do in the event of fire camp. How are they going to mix that up come this fire season working with the COVID? So today we're rocking the 2018 KTM 300 TPI Ultimate Old Age Pensioners Trail Bike. Let me show you around a little bit about what makes this bike so great and so easy. This is out of all the dozens and dozens of 11 dozen motorcycles, dirt bikes I've owned over the years, this is by far the best, easiest, lightest handling dirt bike I've ever owned. TPI, transfer port injection. Let me turn this around here. 300 TPI transfer port injection. So they inject the fuel right there electronically into the transfer port. So both the fuel and the oil now is injected electronically, computer controlled, to give you perfect jetting all the time on your lightweight two-stroke motorcycle. Some of the other little things I've done on this one, a little armor plating here, the Seat Concepts seat, FMF, U.S. Forest Service approved pipe, a little protection there on the expansion chamber. One of the single biggest and best improvements, of course, is the tubeless tire system, running down as low as 4 psi here in the rear tire, a little bit more in the front tire. And that tubeless tire system has an inner bladder, a high pressure inner bladder of 100 psi, which keeps the rim, the tire locked onto the rim. So you can run that tire darn near dead flat and it's still gonna roll for you. So that gives you outstanding traction control with a soft compounded trials type tire at a very low RPM. Super traction over the rocks and terrain, especially here where you're not rolling too fast. Bill Dart, I gotta get the saw out and show you this. Didn't need the saw today, the boys already cleared the trails. Thank you, volunteers. Bill Dart chainsaw rack, fits any size chainsaw right there, and the Baja Designs small Pro Light system, LED lighting. Since this bike is already set up for 12 volt start and computer controlling, the fuel injection, the light just wires in just fine without any kind of rectifier. Some bark busters, and that's about it for the 300 TPI mods. Just get out there and ride it and enjoy it. The only other thing that would make this the ultimate old age pensioner bike is if you added a rake loose clutch, and then you'd really have it made. But so far I still like my manual clutch. The 300 TPI, get you one. And this is the Moto Mule Carrier, which is no longer available. However, a different manufacturer, I believe it's called Heavy Hauler, has the same design, allows you to carry the bike very securely on the back of your vehicle without having to use a trailer, and you can just jack the bike right up into position. The foot pegs are bolted down using these right to the rack. So we talked about a lot of things today, from forest management to riding to retirement planning to COVID-19 and United Airlines. Get out there and ride while you can. See you here. Thanks for your support, especially over on Patreon.